Welcome to the Football Insomniac. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this is Colin Watt, who will be hosting this show on a permanent basis in the very near future, as soon as you can get some guests lined up, Colin.
Yeah, and we're delighted to announce that we do have our first guest coming in with us next Wednesday to go live. He is the creator and owner of the Football CFB podcast. We will be welcoming Callum McFadden to the studio, so we're delighted to have Callum in soon. And he'll discuss a various amounts of topics that we'll have lined up. And remember, this is the Football Insomniac because these are the stories that just keep you up at night.
I'm sure they do, or they send you asleep. Now, you mentioned Callum McFadden. Is he local to yourself? Is he from Greenock, Gourock?
He is, he's a Greenock boy, yeah. Oh, what's the difference? Come on. No, Callum's a Greenock boy. In fact, me and Callum have been friends now for well over 15 years, playing football together as kids. So I'm delighted to see how well he's come along. So yeah, good to have him in the studio and get him part of the State of Mind family. It'll be
interesting to hear Callum's views on pay-per-view, which is going to be the main story that we cover today, and how that could possibly be the saviour of lower league football. We already spoke about, of course, Mark Miller's intervention, the superhero status that he's got at lower reaches of Scottish football in relation to pay-per-view and cameras. We'll come back to that because obviously there was certainly an example of that last night, Colin, with Greenock Morton.
Yeah, and this is the part of the Football Insomniac podcast where we speak about what grinds our gears this week. And for me, it was the game last night. So for those that aren't aware of the Betfred Cup in Scotland, it is our version of the League Cup, and we're in the group stages of that tournament at the moment. Morton were playing Queen of the South at Capello last night. Fantastic opportunity to trial out this new pay-per-view service. They've got some of the club legends in on their commentary team, along with some other local people that they're working for them. And after 20 minutes, that was it. The game went down. They had their own pay-per-view streaming service. Fans paid £10 a ticket, or whatever you would call that now, a match pass perhaps, and ended up going on YouTube, which meant I got to see the game because I wasn't paying £10 to Morton to watch a game I wasn't really interested in. But honestly, Paul, I would urge anybody that's out there to go and watch, or try and watch, 2 minutes of that footage, because it was dreadful. I've got friends that are Morton fans, and I was texting them asking, are you watching this game? And they says, I was, or I tried to, but I couldn't. The cameraman wasn't keeping up with the football. The ball was in the penalty box and the camera was on the halfway line. Now, at a time when these clubs are struggling financially to get money through the door because the gates are closed, there's no real support from the government yet, pay-per-view could be the saviour of lower league football. It could stop these teams going bust if they do it correctly. And if you're looking for an example of how not to do it, then go on to Morton's YouTube channel and try and watch at least 2 minutes of that game last night, because it was a shambles.
Well, what I would say first of all, Colin, is it's one of these things where you actually messaged me last night to alert me of it. We've spoken about the PPV aspect of football and how it can be utilised, in particular for clubs whose revenues are dwindling, if they haven't already dwindled. So first and foremost, anything that gets done at any club which is forward thinking and in the realms of increasing their own income, brilliant. You take your hat off to them, don't you? But and I'm reluctant to criticise anybody who is creating content and putting it out there. I really am reluctant to criticise. But yes, it would appear that there were some teething issues last night. I did watch some of the action on YouTube, like you suggested, and the setup with these cameras often is that they automatically follow the action. Now, I would need to look at the technology, but it looks as though they follow wherever there's a cluster of players. So the ball might not be where the actual camera is. I was interested to watch the Morton game for a couple of reasons. One was I wanted to see what the technology looked like in action. I also wanted to look at Rabin Omar, who's been on a Celtic State of Mind, talking about his football career and his journey in life in general. He's a very interesting and intelligent young man. So when I did watch it, I thought to myself, it obviously isn't working to full capacity last night. I'm reluctant to slag off or criticise anyone who's creating content, as I say, so it's not a dig at Morton, but I think they did come out and there was a statement made, and there's a few teething problems there. But we've already discussed this, haven't we? We spoke about Mark Miller, who is famous for his work. For example, Kick-Ass. Everybody's seen Kick-Ass. I was given one of these graphic, I think they're called graphic novels, called Wanted, from a guy at my work, and he wrote it, and it was tremendous. It was excellent. And then obviously we also spoke about the fact that he worked his love of Celtic into a Wolverine story. He had Wolverine wearing the green and white hoops, and the villain was in a Rangers top. So all these things we have already discussed, but we spoke about how clubs could monetize the games, and a big part of that was all around Mark Miller investing money in Scottish football so that they could film the games and stream them live. And the possibility then would be this PPV service. So you've got a couple of things to consider. Can your website handle the traffic, which I think was the initial issue with Morton, and then it had to go into YouTube. And then, is the product you're actually producing worthy of being monetized? Because, there's a lot of good content out there that's free of charge, Colin. So it needs to be worthwhile of the fee. So this took me back to a conversation I had with Saul Davis of the band James. People will know James for 40 million album sales worldwide, the biggest hit being Sit Down. But it's one of the bands actually that you could pick up almost any of their albums and enjoy it, but their greatest hits is just tremendous. Song after song, you realise just how many big hits James had. And Saul Davis, probably before lockdown, but during lockdown, put a lot of work into a platform that he was developing for live entertainment. So people who wouldn't be able to perform live due to the pandemic, they could put on live events. They would be filmed professionally. It's a really good setup they've got, and they put it on their platform so that they can charge a nominal amount. And he's also thinking about football in that respect. So the first test event that they had, Colin, was with an unknown Portuguese female singer. 25,000 people bought a pass for it. It was a small amount, I think it was a £5, but 25,000 people bought into that. And that was someone on stage in an empty venue with a production team. And it was streamed live. I think there was a 7-second lag, which apparently by live television,
it's really good,
it's pretty good, isn't it? I mean, we've sat in here and watched live games on Celtic TV, and people have texted us that Ferencváros have scored a goal. So yeah, 7 seconds is pretty good. But Saul and I got into the discussion around how could that be used in terms of football. Would you buy a season ticket, for example, a virtual season ticket for a team like St. Pauli? I asked you the question, I asked Kevin Graham. Yeah, I would, if it was cheap enough. If I'm not going to go to the games and I can buy a virtual season ticket for a team like St. Pauli, then I would pay 50 quid. I think there's a lot of people like me who would. So we asked the question, that begs the question, is PPV the saviour? Is that the future for a team like, let's say you were from Alloa, which I'm not, but let's say you were and you supported Celtic. Would you pay 50 quid just to support your local team in that way? Maybe. I don't know, that's the question. Would you?
Yeah,
would you pay 50 quid for a virtual Morton season ticket?
I probably would, yeah. As long as the quality of the product that you were getting was to the value of what you're paying. Do you know what I mean? And watching that game last night, it wasn't worth anything to me, to be perfectly honest with you. I know the way that Capello is set out, and for anyone that's been to Capello, it's a fantastic traditional old proper Scottish football ground. Two of the stands are open to the elements, and the Dublin end and the end behind the goal. They've got the cowshed, which is a phenomenal name for a stand. But the main stand at Capello is built on pillars. So these pillars will block your view for the game. Even for those that are season ticket holders that sit in the main stand, they do have a restricted view because of these pillars. So why put the camera in the main stand last night when they know that there's these restrictions even for the fans that go week in, week out? Why not put it behind one of the goals or on the roof of the stadium looking down so that you've got the chance to view the park in its entirety? So when a camera was being blocked by the pillar last night, you couldn't see the action. And in that sense, any Queens fans that were watching didn't see any of their goals last night.
What I would say again, and I would definitely support anybody who's creating original content, Colin, is we've got to put it down to teething problems, don't we? I mean, when we started on the live broadcast, it took a wee while to get the audio right. It took us even longer to get the sound, the visuals right. And it was a trial and error basis, wasn't it? So we threw ourselves into the live broadcast. I think we're there yet. I think we're there now, but it's taken a wee while to get there. When you're charging somebody, though, I think that's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the point I was about to say there. What A State of Mind does is free content, but fans were charged last night. And I know there's a lot of local support for Morton because they're looking to go into fan ownership. They've got a thing called Morton Club Together, which is actively donating money to the first team fund. Part of the reason why they're able to attract guys like Rabin Omar, as you were speaking about earlier, to the club. So to charge fans for something that looked as if it hadn't been tested previously, it's a bold way of doing things. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know. I feel sorry for anyone that paid their money last night. You're kind of stuck in a catch-22 of whether you ask for the refund or you give your money to support your club. I mean, what do you do in that element? If it was Celtic, I would be annoyed, but I don't know if I would ask for my money back. Whereas I'm sure there's ones out there that are just totally fed up with everything and would expect that money back in their account.
Well, hopefully it improves. We've got to be positive about these things. People are working under different extreme circumstances at the moment, Colin, and we wish the media team at Morton all the best. And as you say there, with regards to maybe they should have tested it, maybe they did. It's just one of these things. But the technology has to be right, and obviously if you're charging for it, you want to get some quality content. Now we're getting some messages coming through on the social media channels. And Barca Boy, I'm from Dublin, so when I travel to Parkhead, it costs. Exactly, and by the way, I never ever take that for granted.
No.
The amount of Irish fans that travel over to Celtic Park. I'd happily buy a Celtic TV pass every year. I think that's the thing. Great point, Barca Boy. I mean, we were speaking yesterday to a big Dunfermline fan, a huge Dunfermline fan, who will probably appear on one of our channels at some point, Colin. Great football guy. And he was talking about how the Pars have got a long-standing club, right? And it's a club that you pay a monthly amount into every single month. And obviously there's benefits of being in that club. So it's a different way to invest in the club. I think back in the day it was called Club 1875, I think, if that's when they were formed, which I think it was. Somebody will correct me, or was it 1878? I should know. So let's say it was 1875's Hibs, 1878. Let's say it was 1878, right? So what basically happens is you sign a direct debit for £18.78 a month, and you are investing in that club over and above going to the games, buying merch, etc. And you get benefits from being part of this club. Now, what that is currently raising for Dunfermline Athletic right now is 20 grand a month. Now, when you're in a situation that we're in, that's massive for a club like the Pars, right? So brilliant. That's great from the club. It's great from the fans who not only set it up all those years ago. I think, in fact, it used to be called the Centenary Club. There you go. So it was set up in the centenary year. And then I think it's now called the Lifeline. So you could be a local that doesn't support Dunfermline and you can still invest in the club. So there's plenty of people doing that to the tune of 20 grand a month. And I think that other clubs within your locality maybe have to reach out a wee bit more as well, because I mean, I live in Dunfermline and I've lived there for almost 20 years, and at no point has anybody reached out to me as a football fan to ask if I would invest in my local club. So sometimes it needs to come down to the club as well to try and engage with the locals. I'm a football fan, I'm a Celtic fan through and through. Would I give the Pars 20 quid a month? Would I get involved in some kind of scheme? Potentially, but I've never been asked.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to the benefits of doing so. Obviously, at the minute, it could be the survival of the club. You don't want to see your local club go bust. You always have that sort of affinity for your local club, even if you don't support them. You always want to see them doing well. So if it came down to them surviving and them not, then you would probably sign up to some sort of service like that. Morton are doing that with their Morton Club Together. Aberdeen do it with the AberdDNA, I think it's called.
All right.
There's a few clubs across Scotland that are certainly doing it. So, yeah. But at the minute, no revenue coming through the gate. Live streaming is been promised on a lot of teams' virtual season tickets.
Right.
It's also a way to make revenue now for games that aren't on television, especially in the lower leagues where we don't really have a TV contract at the moment. So is it going to be the route for survival for a lot of these teams? I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
And as we said, last night was a trial event for Morton. It didn't go right, but if they get it right, then it can be the survival.
I think what will happen as well, Colin, is there's been so many elements of life that have changed during the pandemic that will remain. So why are we doing a live broadcast right now? It's maybe been sped up. The process has been sped up by the fact that we were in lockdown, etc. We're looking at different ways to engage with fans. So there's certain things that will remain once everything goes back to day-to-day living. And I think, a football club working into their finances, this package that might actually appeal to football fans outside of their fan base. Mm-hmm. Would you pay X amount if you were getting free games, free content, and you knew that it was, paying towards the survival of your local club, or a cult club in Germany that you've got an interest in? Then possibly, yeah. I'd be up for that.
So, but I mean, it does go on to a point that we're going to bring up now. We're talking about survival of clubs. We're talking about not just the players and the kind of management team. We're talking about the staff that are at clubs. And I called them out last week, and I'm going to do it once again. Arsenal Football Club, you have been named and shamed 2 weeks in a row on the Football Insomniac. What are you doing? The story that we're going on here is the mascot, Gunnersaurus, a staple of Arsenal's football club, came from the Highbury right through to the Emirates, and they paid him off.
He's got a big Twitter following, eh?
They paid him off.
He's got a massive Twitter following.
And it comes
he or
out,
she.
Yes, dinosaurs, I guess, can be both genders, or all genders, as we put it out there. Mesut Ozil came out and offered to pay Gunnersaurus' wages for as long as Ozil is at the club. I don't think that's a good thing for Gunnersaurus, because Ozil might only be there till the summer. But come on, why? Where is the need here? They're paying £45 million for Thomas Partey. Mm-hmm. They've paid Willian 300 grand a week. They're paying guys obscene amounts of money. How much does it really cost to keep Gunnersaurus at Arsenal Football Club?
It takes us back. It takes us back to the kind of levels and the extremes that clubs sometimes go to save money as well. Remember, Aberdeen removed the toaster. Can you remember that story?
No, I don't.
They removed the toaster so that they would cut down on the electricity, but also on the amount of bread they would need to buy, so that players and staff didn't have a wee bit of toast with a cup of tea and things like that. But that's the saddest part of it. We mentioned it was on the day that Man City were throwing millions at the signing of a player. Meanwhile, there was clubs in England going out of business, being expelled from the league. And there's that disparity between rich and poor, which has never been so evident as it is now in the English game. Football is a working class sport. It always was, Colin. But what we now see is the levels between working classes, i.e. poor, and the elite, not just the elite football clubs and elite setup, but in terms of finances. I mean, people are being priced out the game left, right and centre. People are struggling to get through this, and they're spending billions in the English game, which I found, just disgusting, to be honest with you, under the circumstances. I mentioned it on another podcast in relation to Chelsea's fans being unhappy with the transfer window. They spent £220 million.
Yeah.
So we're at that stage now where we're looking at the ridiculous. It goes to the ridiculous levels. And when you're paying off your mascot, but you're going out and spending that kind of money on players, it just doesn't make sense. So massive kudos on the part of probably the departing Arsenal footballer for making that announcement. But it got me thinking about mascots anyway. And I asked you about Celtics Mascot. right? Our team's Celtic, right? The Hoopy Hound,
Yes.
right? Very popular mascot. But I'm wondering what happened to the original, because he's a remake. He definitely is a remake.
Yep.
He is the second incarnation of the Hoopy Hound. So I'm thinking there's probably a dusty cupboard somewhere with the original Hoopy Hound. He looked a wee bit kind of creepy, didn't he?
Yeah, and I don't want to spoil this for any of the kids that might be watching us. Don't watch the Football Insomniac. Get your mums and dads to watch it instead. There's more than one Hoopy.
Really?
There's more than one.
Well, see, the big thing for me is I always thought a Celtic mascot should have been a lion after the Lisbon Lions, right? I've been informed today that the female Hoopy Hound is called Haley, as in Hail Hail. And there was definitely a missed opportunity when Snoop Dogg, professed his love for Celtic, right? Because we could have renamed him Hoop Doggy Dog. Yeah, and he could have come on to some gangster rap. These are the things I would have done if I was in the marketing team, Colin.
Right, and that is the end of the Football Insomniac this week. Thanks very much, Paul.
Brilliant. So what other football mascots? I mean, again, this is a thing, when I look at the English game, when I was growing up, there wasn't any mascots. The only mascot was a young kid that led the team out. We've now got a mascot for every team, right? And I love the fact that it engages with the younger element of the fan base. You can see them at local galas and going out to kids' parties in schools. Brilliant. Love it. I think it's great. But it's another thing that was introduced pretty late to the British game. If you think back to the NASL back in the 70s, the glitz and the glamour of the American soccer league, the North American Soccer League. And, basically what they did is they brought in all the best players from all over the world to come in and play in this razzmatazz of the league. So you had players like Beckenbauer and Pele and Cruyff, and all the top players went over and played there. Georgie Best, Andy Lynch. That's how I know a wee bit about the game. I had to do a bit of research. But what they had things that were before their time, Colin.
Yeah.
So they had squad numbers, squad names on the back of the jerseys.
The penalty shootout.
All that, they didn't like draws. They had to be a winner.
Yep.
They had mascots way back then. I was finding things out from looking through Andy's magazines and newspapers and all that kind of stuff. You would get offered 2 tickets if you went to a game. The first ticket was for the game, but you could buy a double ticket, which meant you stayed at half-time and full-time for the entertainment. Now, the entertainment wasn't the kind of entertainment you see in Scottish football. So I'm thinking back to last season's League Cup final where 2 people raced around the park. Remember that? Boring, right?
Seen that, no.
Entertainment in NASL, the Beach Boys played live after the game. The Beach Boys. Various other bands would play live. So you got a ticket, and if you paid a wee bit extra, you watched the band after the game. They're selling booze, they're selling hot dogs, all this kind of stuff. But also, they regionalised it. So there was loads of smaller groups that then went into a playoff section. Champions League. Before its time, the NASL. Where it fell down, I believe, was obviously there was loads of franchises, but they were relying on buying players in, and they didn't focus enough on the youth academies. And that's why there was no longevity to that. And I think obviously now when you look at the American game, they seem to have it right now.
Yeah, definitely. And on the Axon Bulletin, we mentioned guys like Lewis Morgan, who at the age of 22 has made the move over from Scotland to America, and there is more and more players like that. I know colleagues in my work who support Atlanta United, and they're buying young South American talent and they're developing. Look at the state of the national team, the US national team, the Canadian national team. They're all of a better standard now than the Scottish national team.
Andy Lynch believes that they will not rest until America wins the World Cup.
And Diana Ross tries to take a penalty again.
Well, it was always in the past where it was they were buying things in, but now you're now seeing the exports coming out of the American game as well. Yeah. Barcelona bought an American player, so it's going to work both ways. Ronnie Dyler's over in New York, playing with Suarez, by the way. Ephraim.
Yep.
So, yeah, that all came from the mascots, but we wanted to name a few others. So a special mention to Sammy the Tammy at Dunfermline, who is quite a controversial mascot. And I don't know what they call the one for cow and beef, but it's a big coup. Big massive coup.
We've got Cappy the Cat at Capello. Kingsley at Partick Thistle.
There you go, marketing genius, yep.
Yeah. I mean,
was that not the boy Maxwell that came up with that?
I think so. I'm not sure, but I mean, I don't even know what that's meant to be.
No, it's just...
I'm trying to think what else is across the league. If Aberdeen don't have a sheep, they're totally missing out. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's lots of things. Even you're talking about like things like that. Cheerleaders. I think Kilmarnock might be the only Scottish Premiership team that still have a cheerleading outfit that come out to do performances at half time.
Right.
But
half time entertainment, we're no good at that, are we? In this country, we're not good at the entertainment kind of side of things. I remember back to the Hampden season, we brought out lookalikes. So we brought out Cher at half time, but it obviously wasn't Cher. And we brought out like Rod Stewart to come out, but it was a lookalike, and they sang us a few tunes, and it was murder. I mean, it was horrific. So obviously we signed up to some promotions agency, and they were sending us all the lookalikes and not so sound-alikes to come out and give us half-time entertainment.
Yeah, I'm absolutely outstanding. Like flabbergasted at that. I've never heard that story before.
Oh,
there's maybe a good reason why I've not heard that story before.
Definitely, that's what happened. See, the thing for me, Celtic have got enough people that support the club that are of that ilk, you know, musicians, artists, performers, etc. We could have good half-time entertainment, and we just don't, do we?
No, we don't. But we've got like the windfall draw and etc. And it's always good when you get ex-players that you haven't seen in a long time. There's certain guys that are kind of still in and about Scottish football, like Chris Sutton, John Hartson, who come up and make the draw now and again. But you get a buzz when you get some players that you haven't seen in a long time, like Lubo Moravcik or Henrik Larsson, that come over especially to watch the game and do the halftime draw.
Right, but there was one occasion where we did some very good halftime entertainment, and that's when LL Cool J came on to do the Paradise Windfall draw, wearing a bizarre outfit. Or was it a tracksuit?
I don't know.
Kind of like beige. Yeah, that was interesting, and that went viral, that went worldwide. So there are occasions where Celtic should really capitalise on it, and other clubs in Scotland, because the half-time entertainment is pointless at the minute.
The best half-time entertainment is at Hampden, when you're in the Scottish Cup or the League Cup, I can't remember which one it is, and they do the football fans in training, penalty shootout, where you've got to run from the halfway line into the box. That is the best entertainment, because some of the shots on goal are pretty terrible. But it's always a good bit of a convivial atmosphere between the two teams that are playing. You're cheering your own team on whilst booing the other team when it's just a guy that's managed to go on the Hampden pitch to get 10 seconds or longer to get down to the box and score. So
those pitches, Colin, are bigger than they look. I'm telling you, once you're on there. Now, you're talking about Hampden, and the team until recently that called Hampden home was Queen's Park. And if you remember on the first episode of the Football Insomniac, we spoke about horrendous jerseys. Man United had just released what has been affectionately known as the Zebra kit at that point. And we both spoke about some of the most memorable for the wrong reasons football kits. And lo and behold, we're sitting here talking about one that should be in that category. It's Queen's Park, the away kit. Talk us through that design.
I mean, where do you start with this? So, sponsored by Iron Brew. I think the best way to describe it in this generation is it looks as if it's came straight out of Candy Crush, with all the various circles of multiple colours, green, amber and red, I believe, all in a weird sort of layout across, in bars across the kit. What I've been told is that the kit and the dots actually symbolise league results. So green being a victory, amber being a draw and red being a defeat, from the year that they were born right through to the current day. So there's a lot of red in there, but there is flashes of green throughout it. I guess for historians it might be quite interesting to see the results put on a kit, but it's in the top 5 for the worst kits ever, definitely.
But what's happened, and we've got to say this, right, we've got to give them credit where credit is due, is we're talking about it.
No, definitely.
It made, social media headlines, it made news headlines, and that, I think, should be, for a club like Queen's Park or other clubs, we're talking about other clubs generating interest, Colin, that should actually be what they're aiming for. A bit of controversy, get people talking. Who was it, Ayr United, that used the models that they painted, naked models, and they painted the kit onto them, and it always got a bit of traction for obvious reasons. So well done to Queen's Park's marketing team. But in terms of design, people reckon it's the scores. I've seen the promotional photographs, and on the left-hand side, for anyone who's aware of the legendary figure that is Eddie Hunter, former manager at Queen's Park, who's still there. I think what they did with the reds, amber and green is that they transcribed one of his team talks and used a red dot for every expletive because Eddie likes a wee sweary word from time to time. But fair play to Queen's Park, well done. I think it's a horrific kit, but we're talking about it.
Exactly.
So job done.
Exactly. They've done... It is a bit of PR genius because I think the actual underlying colour of the kit is orange. Is that right?
Yes.
So that goes with their sponsor, I Am Brew. Another famous part of Scottish history is I Am Brew. A famous part of Scottish history is Queen's Park, the oldest professional club. Well, now professional. They were the longest standing amateur club.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned there, Eddie Hunter, a legend of Queen's Park, a legend of Scottish football. So it does all sort of tie in, and it kind of leads us on to our next talking point, which is legends of football. And it reminds me of the old Sky Sports Masters Football Day. It's what filled the summer. Was every Sunday afternoon there was regional tournaments held where it was basically in the form of the old 10 and 6s, indoor, teams of ex-Celtic players, ex-Rangers players, ex-Man United, Liverpool, competing to win a tournament. And it takes me back to an interview that I had with Frank McAvenny, where he spoke about his experience playing in Masters football. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is, Paul, it's back on TV.
Brilliant.
It is back. It's not new
so
tournaments.
They're scraping the archives now then, eh?
It's not new tournaments, but for anyone who's a subscriber to Amazon Prime, you can go and watch the old Football Masters tournaments on there from 2001 to 2011.
It's a bit ageist. Can we not go further back and show us the 10 and 6s for 1992 when Celtic won it?
Well, maybe that's the kind of footage that we need to get.
Celtic v St Johnstone in the final.
But it's fantastic. I mean, this was my childhood during the school holidays. It was a Sunday night. It was on Sky. I think it was 4 till 7, and they held the sort of 8 minute per half tournaments. The Scottish teams, there was always Celtic and Rangers in it, but it kind of mixed it up where Motherwell, who actually won a UK tournament at one point, were the best Masters team in the UK. Hearts, Partick Thistle, Hibs,
Did they have mascots?
They probably did. I tried to watch the 2011 one.
If it's ever relaunched, because as I said yesterday, we love Frank McAvenny. Frankie boy is a good guy, and if he's involved in picking a Celtic team that you've suggested previously, maybe we should have Hoop Doggy Dog as a mascot.
You're not going to let this one go. You're going to try and get as many laughs out of this.
Mate. Honestly, marketing genius.
What is interesting about that tournament though was when I spoke to Frank McAvenny, what he said was that the teams were actually picked by a selection committee down south. So they weren't actually picked in Scotland. So when you looked at the Rangers team that they had back then, they had guys like Mark Haitley, Ali McCoist, and more recent years they had guys like Alex Ray. But they were picked from a central team down south. Celtic had guys that made like 2 or 3 appearances. And for that reason, the fans never ever turned out at Braehead Arena to support Celtic. So when Frank got the call from the team down south, he says, I'll do it because I've played for West Ham, I've made it to the finals, I've won it, but I want to pick the team. So the team he picked that year had some incredible Celtic players in it. And they went on and they romped the Scottish Masters and went down to the grand final, which I believe was held in Nottingham. Where Frank tells me that they made the key mistake of deciding that on the eve of the tournament they should have a night out. Now, when they're going to be running about in a roasting warm arena the next day on what was basically somebody's carpet from their mum's house that was put down on floor, that was never going to end well, was it? I mean, Frank basically said that he was struggling to pick 6 that would actually be sober enough to start the game.
Brilliant. That's what happens if Frankie Boy's your manager, eh? We'll go for a night out before the game. Now, I do remember the 10 and 6s well. What astonished me about that is it was the players who were actually part of your team, right? It was during a season. And when Celtic actually won it, one of the players who was playing in the team, because obviously it was 6 aside, I think there was a few subs, was our biggest signing, our record signing, Tony Cascarino. Now, in this day and age, you would be wrapping people up in cotton wool, playing a reserve team, whatever you had to do just to fulfil your sponsorship duties. But we were playing people like John Collins, Joe Miller, Tony Cascarino. But, it certainly made one person happy, Colin, because you're a big fan.
Well, that was the way it was. 4 till 7 on Sky Sports was the Masters football, and at 8 o'clock on Sky 1 was Dream Team, and that was your Sunday night. Well, for me, growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Talking about the late 90s, one of the bands that I loved and love to this day, still listening to them on a regular basis, was Massive Attack. I think it might have been a wee bit kind of out of your musical taste, Colin, but a massively influential band. Don't think they've ever released a bad album, but the kind of go-to albums to this day for me is Blue Lines, Protection, Mezzanine. Mezzanine produced so many great tracks, including Teardrop. You'll remember the video. A Teardrop, absolutely astonishing, brilliantly visual band, which isn't surprising because one of the men behind it is Robert Del Naja, who's an artist. He's basically an artist, used to be a graffiti artist. And he was in the news this week as well.
So he's now got a new job, from what I hear. He is the artistic director of Forest Green Rovers. Now, I'm trying to work out what that role will actually entail. Do you think, any ideas what it might do?
Well, I think that would be a much more creative way to look at the team that's maybe behind. You've mentioned the team behind Celtic social media, some kind of marketing, commercial, social media team. Every club has them. It's so important. And I think what Forest Green Rovers have done here is forward thinking. Again, we're talking about a football club. It's normally outside of our sphere. And that's because someone like Robert Del Naja, who is with such an influential, groundbreaking band as Massive Attack, will create news. That will be on the NME website today. I've not checked, but I'm sure it will be. And I think he'll be that creative director. Will he be looking at things like kit, merchandise, social media, that kind of marketing side of things? We're moving into a situation outside of the lockdown period of the pandemic, whereby, Colin, will football programmes exist? How will football be televised? All these things will change, and what you need is a creative team to come up with suggestions and get a creative team around about them. That's an absolutely amazing appointment, if you ask me.
I think Forest Green are certainly a team that are going out with the original boundaries of football. I mean, they're the first team to go vegan. You have to follow a vegan diet to be part of the playing squad there. They're trying to go 100% green energy across their stadium. And now they're hiring someone like Del Naja to be the artistic director. So there is certainly different variations of creativity within football, but Forest Green are really kind of stretching the traditional boundaries of football. And as you said, if he's part of the design team for kits, if he's doing the match programme, what it does is it gets people talking. And as you said, it'll be on NME today, it'll be in the papers, it'll be on podcasts like this where we're discussing it. So if that's what they're looking to do to get the publicity, then job done.
Oh yeah, and I love that when football and art collide, because for too long football was kind of looked down upon as being this working class sport. But when you are into football and you start speaking to other people who are involved or even just support the game, they're creative, Colin. They're talented in many, many different ways, in literature and music and art. And there is this collide, it's like two worlds colliding there, and I love it. And you've seen it in the past. I remember the Super Furry Animals sponsored Cardiff City. So would I ever wear a Cardiff City jersey? No. But if I was at a Super Furry Animals gig and I seen one in the merch stall, I maybe would. Mogwai sponsored one of the local St. Roch's schools with a jersey. Instantly that jersey becomes viable, it becomes marketable, because it's got a name of one of your favourite bands on the front of it. I asked Kevin Graham the question a while back, if Celtic were ever sponsored by a band, who would the band be? And I think the pair of us came up with Primal Scream. Primal Scream would be the sponsor. So it's that crossover. I always remember early early days of Oasis, and there was that photo shoot where the two Gallaghers were wearing Man City tops, and that's when they were not fashionable. You know, it was the old brother tops, home strip obviously light blue, away strip was white and black, I think, Umbro kits. So the two worlds collide. I think it's a tremendous appointment, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the creativity starts to flow out of Forest Green Rovers.
Yeah, and it does ask the question about the crossover. There is obviously, as you said, guys like this who cross over from the music world, to cross over from the art world, to cross over from different worlds, even the financial world. You look at Mark Warburton, who went from being a stockbroker to being a manager. I asked the question then, what is the best transition from non-football role to football role, or reverse? So I'm thinking guys like Dion Dublin, being the host of the property programme, created his own musical instrument, the dube. Have you not heard of this? No? It's like a special drum. Google it. The dube, D-U-B-E. It's Dion Dublin's own musical instrument.
Really?
I'm trying to think. Thomas Gravenson and poker.
James Allen, frontman of Las Vegas.
Exactly.
That's my favourite right there.
So I'm sure that the listeners and the viewers all have their own. So comment and let us know what you think. Even if we don't read your comments live on the air, we will go back and review them afterwards, and we'll maybe bring out what our favourite ones will be next week.
Joseph Bunn has just said Aslan. Now, what I think you mean by that, Joseph, is that if Celtic had a band sponsoring them, it would be Aslan. For anybody who doesn't know who they are, shame on you. Wee Christie's book came out, I think it was Christmas time there, his autobiography, well worth I read Christy Dignam. And if anybody doesn't know who Christy Dignam is, get onto YouTube and watch his rendition of Greenfields of France, which is absolutely tremendous. And on the banjo, I think it is, Finbar Fury's on the, is it a banjo he's playing? It's tremendous, unbelievable. Hairs in the back of the neck stuff. So good shout, Joseph, and thanks for getting involved in the Football Insomniac. Colin, what's happening next week? Remind your viewers.
So we do have a different format next week. Paul, you'll not be with us, unless you really want to be.
I'll do the buttons. I'll be the producer.
We're having a special guest in. I will be hosting next week, and we will be welcoming Callum McFadden from Football CFB onto the show, where we'll be looking at what we discussed this week and seeing if anything comes out. Very much like the Gunnar-Saurus news. Who knows, maybe Masters Football will come back. The old Star Sixes was out a couple of years ago. When we talk about it on here, something seems to happen. So we'll follow up on this week's. We'll take a look at your favourite transitions from football to normal jobs or in reverse. And we'll take a look back at this week in football and pick out some of the more zany and interesting topics to discuss with Callum.
Left field.
Exactly.
If we're talking about massive attack, you can call it left field as well.
We'll call it left field. And all that's really left for us to say is thanks very much for watching. It is a free content. Go to YouTube, subscribe, click on the bell for notifications, and you'll see when we go live. We're also on Twitter and on Facebook, and we hope to see you all again next week.
Thank you for tuning in, guys and girls.